Welcome. You're probably here thinking, what? Another one of these? We don't need another one of these. We got the besties. We got all the defunct ones that the Ringer does. We got the short games one that you like listening to, Jamie. Any others that we should advertise for free here on our little tiny show one person's listening to?
No.
Nah, well, the reason why we're doing this one is because we like playing Steam games, and recently we noticed that it was kind of impossible to swim through the sea of lesser known titles and the ones that folks aren't hearing about on those other podcasts, on the main news websites that are kind of being consolidated, and more and more kind of written by a dwindling number of reporters. We kind of wanted to add our voices into the ring and simulate the feeling of, heading to your local GameStop or your local game store growing up and rummaging through that bargain bin. We put that line at $15 and below. And what we're going to do for this show is each week or every other week, whatever cadence we decide on, we'll try to make it as consistent as possible. We're going to play game that we buy for under $15. It's a title that hopefully you haven't heard of already or are just kind of on the periphery of your consciousness. And we're going to play it for you. We're going to tell you if we like it or don't like it. And hopefully that helps your brains and your wallets and your hearts. And to introduce our gaming background, I'm Jonny. I loved GameCube growing up. Then I went through this pretentious phase where I thought I was too smart for games, and then I realized that games save lives. And then I tried to become a games journalist, and I wrote some articles for Eurogamer and Games Industry and Nintendo Life, and I realized that A, you can't make any money doing it, B, it's really hard to get articles through editors, and so I said, to hell with the editor, I'll just edit a podcast. And Jamie, go ahead and introduce your gaming background.
Well, like Jonny introduced, I am Jamie. My gaming background is that I grew up with two brothers, so we often played Halo. We had a fun game within Halo that we like to play called Warthog Jousting, where we would just drive warthogs as fast as we could into each other and see how wildly the cars would flip. That was pretty fun. But then when I started to grow out of thinking that playing Halo was a fun and cool thing to do, I fell out of just playing video games in general. And then I picked it back up through a friend who got me into some of the Zelda classics. And then I feel like from there, the love slowly grew back.
And now, we both have Steam Decks. My dad gave us one each for the holidays a little while back. We've got a gaming PC, and we're ready to tell you what the best and worst games under $15 are. We're going to do the dirty work for you. Jamie, the game this week, the game that we played, it's one called Launderley, and it's an extremely dreary game. We knew that from the jump. The premise is a young girl. She was at this kind of Victorian style mansion community thing, and a huge number of bodies, somewhere in the 20s, 25 to 29 bodies were found in the front of the mansion one night. But she was left alive. And the premise is that you are a couple of investigators. I believe the names are Ava and Elbert. Elbert is kind of emblematic of the names. There's a lot of funny names in here, and you get to know a lot of them because you're going to be reading a lot of text. And Ava and Elbert accompany Blanche, the girl, as she walks through the drawings that she made of that night and the crime and the place she lived. And you basically go through. It is in first person, so kind of like twin stick if you're playing on a controller, or using mouse, I believe, if you're playing on PC. Is that right, Jamie?
Mm-hmm.
And you go around and you basically click on a bunch of objects, and the girl tells you what they are. And that's pretty much it. As you go throughout, Launderley, which is the name of the Victorian style manor, and then you have like a school and a church and other places nearby. You collect clues, which are kind of these key frames that you click on, key objects that you click on, and each clue tells you a little bit about a person. I believe there are 269 clues, and you do a lot more clicks than 269, I can tell you that much. But the undertaking of this game was, I think, extremely ambitious. It dares to set you free. I mean, free enough, it's not completely open, but free in a world where you can kind of click on any object, and each one has a, pretty unique little layer of text that comes up to describe it. And it's the girl talking, Blanche. She's like, this is a rock. This is a board that they were nailing up on the window. Everything from that to like, this is the devil Bible that this, master of the house read at his orgies. And it's an interesting story told through an interesting light in a way that I think only video games could do, or even attempt to do. I'm not sure it was done all that well, because you're trying to basically piece together the stories of these, 20-some people, each with their own kind of like motives and interests and things going on that night. What did you think of the game overall, Jamie?
I mean, covered a lot of pieces there on what the game is about, and I think all of those can be dissected in different ways. I think I overall had a good time on my initial playthrough. I felt like I was enjoying it. I was enjoying like what I was discovering and interacting with. There are a lot of aspects of the game that really wowed me. But then after about maybe like 5 to 7 hours of the playthrough, then I kind of felt like I had seen everything I wanted to see and experienced everything I wanted to experience with it, and found it difficult to get myself going back to it to want to complete it or progress further. So kind of a mixed bag on really enjoying the experience, but also not necessarily getting hooked till the end.
Yeah, and to be clear, we're going to make a promise to you, our listeners. One of us, at least, is going to finish the game each episode. This time, that was me. I had some long flights, and I put about 12 hours into the game to finish it. And it, to me, did not provide the satisfying mystery whodunit resolution I was hoping for, because that's kind of why I got into it. It was like, oh, I love detective novels, I love detective games, and this is going to be one of those. It's certainly not kind of Return of the Obra Dinn or Curse of the Golden Idol-esque. I would say it's more almost like a visual novel, or a bit of a like collectathon. It's a bit soothing to play. Like you can kind of get into this rhythm where you're like twin sticking around and you're clicking on everything in a room, and like that's kind of it. I listened to a Good Besties episode recently about Promise Mascot Agency, and Chris Plant was talking about like the soothingness of kind of just doing one game mechanic over and over, and like it doesn't have to mean more outside of that. And I think that would maybe work for this game if it weren't so dreary. I kind of want to take a moment here before we get too far and like talk about the art style. It's like all hand drawn and like purposefully drawn, like, maybe a 5-year-old would draw it. How did it feel walking around those drawings to you, Jamie? Was it like a little disorienting? Was it a cool experience? I thought it was very unique myself.
Yeah, I feel like I would say that was one of the most unique aspects of the game, or the part that I think I enjoyed the most, is that all the art and its hand-drawn aspect is really just like quite incredible. I mean, there are a lot of like repeated objects where I'm sure they just had the uploaded picture and were able to insert it in different places. But even then, there's things tucked away in little corners and places that you think you're being smart investigating, but turns out there are things there for you to explore. And like the art in the dark story, like the the hand-drawn drawings themselves kind of have like a creepy edginess to them that fits with the story. So I think that was like one of the biggest parts of the experience, is that the art and the way that you interact with it and how that combines with the story feels really special.
It's very atmospheric, and I think we both agreed that like the first few hours we were playing it, it was really a treat. Like, I personally have never really spent time with a game that looked like this really at all. And the way that the developer kind of, I'm sure, had a vision for, we're going through this murder mystery through this girl's memories, and it's all going to be in drawings, and executed on it in that sense was a real bright spot for me. So I think like if you're curious at all about it, like definitely check it out. At least like have a look at the trailer because it's really worth seeing. And in my opinion, playing at least for a couple hours.
Yeah, and I think that's what drew both you and I to it when we were looking at what games we wanted to play too, is that we both were like, oh, this art style seems really cool. All of it's hand drawn. Like it would be, even if the story of the game falls short, I think we were both excited to like interact with the art.
Definitely. And let's now move on and talk about the story a little bit. Right off the bat, I was kind of given a red flag where like there's dialogue and it's like the detectives being like, Blanche, do you remember all those dead people? Like, and they name like the full number, and it's like, yeah, I'm sure. She at least knows there were some dead people. And it turns out that she does remember it as she draws it. And that kind of set the tone for me. I thought that the writing throughout was actually pretty decent. I didn't feel a lot of stiltedness in that sense. The only problem is like, and we'll talk about the length moving on, is like I said, 12 or so hours for me to finish it. And a lot of the characters that you're trying to, uncover their identities, it's like, oh, they died. They didn't do anything wrong. That was sad. Rest in peace, this person, as you like discover their fate after you collect all their clues. And that's like 15 of the characters is like basically that exchange. And the girl being really sad that like this person in her life died. And that's totally fair. It's just like, I could have done with maybe like 5 of those characters instead of 15. But the writing, if a bit repetitive, if a bit super confusing as to like the motives and what's actually going on and why the investigators are there. They're not like police. They like work for a secret organization. It comes out later, and they talk about supercomputers at one point and soul banks and all these things that are very anachronistic to the time period that I didn't really understand. So I think the story kind of goes off the rails. If you're asking me, what do you think, Jamie?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get that far in the game, so when you told me that the story kind of takes its turn to that point, I was surprised because there's not really any indication of that. And I feel like from where I ended, like it doesn't need that. It could have just kept doing what it was doing and been what it was without maybe trying to provide some deeper level, mind-turning, reality-questioning twist in there, which I'm not sure if that's, what it really was, but I think it was doing just fine without that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, you can tell this was made by a small team, developed by, like, 1 or 2 writers, because, like, you can tell they're having this idea, like, whoa, what if, oh, and then what if this? And it's like, you just take out maybe a few paragraphs of dialogue and there's nothing about supercomputers and soul banks and a little more about soul banks, but like I didn't understand why they were putting in these different elements when I thought Launderley worked at its best when it was just like kind of a period drama murder mystery. And they strayed from that a little bit. Didn't give me the kind of resolution that I felt like I was working toward either. But we'll try to keep this as spoiler free as possible if you do end up playing it. Another thing that I kind of wanted to discuss was like the sound design. I thought was like not that well done. It was very quiet. Like the levels weren't great. And I also thought that the sounds that the characters were making were so repetitive that like as you click through dialogue, like they just have one kind of pip for each character where like the male detective will go, and the girl will go, and like it's just like you're clicking through it and it's like And I don't know. It's not something that I want to critique heavily because I know small teams have limited resources, but I do think that like a little bit of variation and more attention paid to the sound design could have gone a long way, especially in something that's supposed to be more horror oriented or at least atmospheric and dark.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And you listeners can't see this, but as Jonny was making those sound effects, our dog looked up very concerned, wondering what those noises were. So you can maybe get a picture from that of just what it was like playing the game, hearing those sounds over and over again with every button click.
I mean, she should be concerned. I made drawings of a bunch of dead people. Another thing to talk through with this is kind of like the end game. And I can speak to that as far as like, well, throughout the story, how do you progress through, Jamie? What is the like mechanic by which you're going from thing to thing?
Well, you kind of have to be reading along a little bit to take the many hints that they're giving you on which direction you need to go, which for someone like me who's getting a little impatient doing all this reading because I don't like reading, and I just found myself button spamming, that was a little more difficult to do. So they add another layer to it where it's meant to be pretty open, where you can click anything, explore anything, but then there are certain rooms or areas where if you try to explore them, you'll get some dialogue saying, oh, we should probably look at this first. Let's not go in there yet, or let's not go here yet. So there are actual barriers in place to prevent you from going places. And there are also some more visual cues indicating, if an area has been fully explored or not. So if you're not much of a reader, there are some other boundaries in place to kind of keep you on track. If you're looking for something totally open, that game is not quite that, although it does still feel pretty open, I think. Otherwise, there are plenty of cues in the dialogue to keep you going on the right path.
Yeah, there are these little episodic mysteries, right? Where you'll like enter a room and click the body there, and then it will like zoom in and provide like a little overture that says like the person's name, and then you click all the relevant clues and you get a little parlor scene where they kind of describe exactly what happened. It's a lot of like clicking around for that last object that you're missing to like complete the parlor scene so you can just get the damn summary. And I think I've oftentimes actually thought that it might have been better of almost like a graphic novel or something of that sort, where like you're still getting the beautiful images and you're still getting kind of the narrative voice, but you don't have to like click around for 10 minutes because you just missed clicking on this tiny little part of the wall. Like it's not very well signposted either, which I think can be frustrating.
Yeah, and that's something I don't know if we want to dive into all of that or even dive into it right now, but that was, I think, one of the aspects that I found a bit frustrating, is that it wasn't always clear in what order to do things. I think there are a lot of times where I had clicked on something and thought I had it covered, but then you have to wait until you trigger a certain event. So there's a couple times where I found myself being like, what the heck? Like, how do I move on from this? And it was because I needed to re-click something I'd clicked earlier. So it was a little unintuitive and frustrating in some of those ways. But thankfully, I could just bug you next to me and ask you what I needed to do to move on.
Yeah, and I think like, so a lot of the clicking, right, gives you clues to each character, and you can view kind of your codex of clues by character at any time. And then when you're done and you have a full one complete, you can go to this area of the manor that like allows you to click into a list that brings up all the characters, and you can walk around and click on each one once you have their full clues, and it'll give you another parlor scene of like Elbert and Ava talking to Blanche, and they'll be like, this is what happened to this person, and then Blanche will be like, oh, I'm so sad, or oh, he was a rat bastard. And that's kind of how the game progresses. At the end, once you're done with kind of all the episodic scenes, you'll likely have some like clues that are outstanding because you just didn't click like a pillow or a futon, or I was looking for this chest of drawers for a very long time on the plane today. And that was kind of a rough moment, but that was honestly one of the more exciting scavenger hunty parts because you're like looking at the clue that they give for like how to find it when it's like question marked. You're like walking around looking for it. So that was actually pretty interesting. But then, like I said, like getting to the full 269 out of 269 clues was not quite as satisfying as I would have liked. So that was a little tough. But I think like we said, the visual art portion was a real bright spot and really well executed, I think, for most of the game. It kind of gives me like almost a Paper Mario vibe at times if it were in like a very dreary gothic world.
Yeah, completely different style, but
yeah, for sure. But hey, don't bash Rogueport. That place can be pretty rough, especially for Mario and the gang. Yeah, I worked on our Steam Decks. We have Steam Deck OLEDs. That's what we'll be playing stuff on a lot of the time. And now I think we've reached the part of the show where we're going to talk a little bit about how we're going to wrap up each game. So we're going to describe it. We're going to do just what we did, talk about the different pros and cons, and then we're going to give each of our endorse or do not endorse. And as part of this, we can talk about, what we liked, what kind of gamer we would recommend it to, because we each have our own style of games that we like. And then Jamie will give an endorsement or not, and I will give an endorsement or not. And then whenever we consider things like best of lists or game of the year, we'll only look at things that we both endorse. But it's kind of going to be a good way for, as you get a sense of what we enjoy, you're going to get a sense of like, oh, well, Jonny likes the more point and click games and Jamie likes the Metroidvanias. So if Jamie endorses a Metroidvania and Jonny doesn't, that, carries the weight it does with the preferences, So that said, Jamie, what are your closing thoughts? Endorse or not endorse? Do you want to point out any details that maybe we didn't land on enough?
Yeah, I think there are like a few different thoughts that I still have that I feel like we didn't quite cover yet and probably tie into some of the endorsement aspect. Something I kind of wanted to talk about and mention was just how heavy the game is with like clickable things. Not heavy, and it is heavy in tone as well, but heavy in clickable things. I think the very first room you enter, you're like wandering around, kind of like clicking some different things, and then very quickly realize that pretty much every single object or drawing in the game you can interact with and get a little text excerpt from.
You can get a
yeah. And some of them you realize like some things, like there are a bunch of bottles of wine around that like often will say the same thing or give the same text, but then you'll get a random one that doesn't sometimes.
That sucks.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say that I am a completionist, but I think I'm maybe higher on that scale than you at times, or at least with like open world games. I definitely find that drive to want to discover everything and not leave any stone unturned. So I would say that if you're further along on that scale, this game is probably not the game for you because there are just way too many things to click. Unless you want that, then it's perfect for you.
I clicked everything, and I had what I would call a fine time.
All right. I mean, that's a pretty good review then, because like I said, there are lots of things to click. So I think that was an aspect of the game that I found interesting. It triggered a part of my brain where at times I was almost feverishly just like running around clicking every single object. And other times I was not clicking anything unless I thought it was important. So I think that's something to note of the game, because I think people will have certain feelings about that amount of interaction.
Yeah, that's a good note. Also on like the heavy in tone note, like it's not kids at all. It's not for kids at all. It's like super heavy triggering things.
Yes.
Like the amount of trauma that the girl Blanche has after this is astronomical.
Right.
And it's like, even though there is kind of a comical amount of clicking, it's like it's super sad and it never lets up. It's like sad from the jump. Like you walk out into the first area and you see someone like hanging.
Yeah.
It's
someone's eye poked out in the first
that's the
first
that's like
scene.
the starter demo scene is like, oh, this guy was peeping on us while we were changing our clothes, so Emma put like a pencil through the hole and poked his eye out by accident.
That's how you're introduced.
Yeah, and it really does only get more like traumatic from there. So definitely don't play this unless you're looking for that.
Right. And I know you had mentioned earlier the dialogue not having too many parts that felt just completely unhinged or out of place, but that was something that I remember focusing on. Was a lot of times the detective's dialogue would ask if Blanche was okay to move on, and Blanche would respond very eagerly like, yes, I want to help you solve this. And I think that was something I thought about, is like, Blanche must have so much trauma. How is she just happily going through all of these scenes? But
which is a little discordant too, because the whole reason that they're going through her drawings is because they say like she doesn't talk much at first, but then like the whole game is her talking, because you're clicking on everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was strange. There are parts where they're like, let's take a little break, but like obviously you're not taking a break from the game, but it's not realistic in that sense. I think it's a little tough that they tried to handle that much in a game that I think is not fully equipped to do it. It is a beautiful, like, atmospheric game, as we've talked about in many ways, but it's not overly sensitive to those topics that do require it a lot of the time.
Right.
It's like every trigger warning possible.
Pretty much.
It's in there. So, yeah, it's not what I would call a good time.
Yeah. But I know there are a lot of people out there who really like learning about cults or cult stories. And if that's your cup of tea,
that's this.
Then maybe it can be endorsed for you.
Definitely. Anything else you wanted to mention detail-wise, pros, cons, before we go ahead with endorsements?
I don't think so. Those were probably the big ones that were still on my mind.
Sweet. Do you want to go first or me?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump into it. I feel like I'm going to struggle with the endorsements section every time, because I just want it to be so conditional on who you are, what you like. I think if I had to give a hard yes or no endorsement, I would probably land on no. But I think some of my ifs, ands, and buts would be, if it was cheaper, I think I would be more ready to endorse it. For $15, I think it's just not really worth that experience. If it were closer to $5, then maybe it could be. Like I said, I played maybe 5 to 7 hours of it and enjoyed that time, but then didn't feel inclined to finish it. I think if you get overwhelmed by a lot of things to interact with, probably not your game. If you like exploring things, reading a story, finding nooks and crannies, if you like interacting with a lot of stuff, then you might enjoy it.
Yeah. I mean, that was a very good kind of summary. I think if this was one of our style of games, it would be more mine. And I am a hard no endorse. I think it needs to be a lot shorter to be more effective, because this is the type of game that you want to like spend a couple hours in and be like, wow, that was like a really impactful experience. I really liked that atmosphere and those drawings. But it doesn't have enough mechanically to pull you through the full, 12 or so hours that it takes to finish. And like I said, the story doesn't have much of a payoff. So for that reason, sharks. No, it's the sharks telling the pitcher. For that reason, I'm out.
Yeah, and I think that is gives me an interesting thought too. I know you mentioned wondering if it would have done better as a visual novel, and yeah, I think if the story had been more impactful, then I think it would be a different experience. But it did kind of feel like a story that was just throwing all of these horrible things at you to just have it be a horrible situation of a story, instead of maybe a story that could have hit like a deeper chord inside your body. Like, I'm thinking about some of the horror novels or movies that people love and how they just kind of like really hit you deep in the soul for different reasons. And I don't think the story was quite that. And if there had been more investment on that side, then maybe it would have been a more worthwhile feeling game.
Yeah, well, I imagine it was just like, I can't stress enough also how, how ambitious of an endeavor this was by, oftentimes it seemed like a one person, if not just a small team. And it's like so many clues, so many characters, so many things to click on. I think like the fact that they got a game out of this at all that worked, like it works great. We didn't really find many bugs, I don't think. We recommend playing it on controller, and like hats off to them for doing that.
And all the art. I mean, again, like we were drawn to the game from the art, so
super unique.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it gets a double does not endorse. Whoopsie. We're starting off Bargain Bin on a bit of a negative note.
Wah, wah.
So sip your seltzer and sit tight, because we're going to be coming to you with another game soon. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.
See you next time.
Bargain Bin is a production of the Soil Day Radio podcast network. You can check out more about this show and our other offerings at soildayradio.com. That's SOILDAYRADIO.com. Thank you.